Good morning, everyone. Thank you to everyone who's joining us today in the Atlantic Council studios, as well as to all of you that are connected online. Thanks for joining us today for the launch of this important report on the justice system in Colombia. This was a collaborative effort between the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arsh Latin America Center, as well as the Pontificia Universidad Javeriana in Colombia. My name is Jeff Ramsey. I'm a senior fellow for Colombia and Venezuela here at the Latin America Center. We're here today because we all know that an effective and fair justice system is the cornerstone of any democracy. In Colombia, the increased demand for access to justice in recent years is further straining an already burdened system, leading to inefficiencies and threats to judicial independence. At a time when democracies around the world are under siege, guaranteeing equal and effective access to justice for all has never been more critical. The stakes are high, not just for Colombia, but for the entire region, as we're seeing now in the recent days with events in Venezuela. As a top U.S. security and economic partner in South America, the smooth functioning of Colombia's justice system has ramifications that extend far beyond its borders. Today, we're proud to release the findings of a 2-year research project that examines the level of access and delivery of justice in Colombia from a private sector perspective. The findings we present today are not just academic. They have real-world implications. Inefficiencies in the justice system can deter investment, they can stifle economic growth, and they can undermine public trust in democratic institutions. A strong and independent justice system is fundamental to ensuring that Colombia can continue to develop economically and maintain its role as a key strategic ally for the United States in South America. We look forward today to a fruitful discussion of the report's findings and recommendations. I want to thank our panelists, particularly Juan Carlos Botero and Astrid Liliana Sanchez of the Universidad Javeriana, for all of their incredible work on this report. This really has been the product of over 2 years of collaboration, and we're excited to be able to share the results of this report with you all today. I also want to encourage everyone to follow the work of the Atlantic Council's U.S.-Colombia Advisory Group, a multi-stakeholder working group led by honorary co-chairs Senators Ben Cardin and Bill Hagerty. This group works to advance a whole-of-society approach to addressing the most vital policy issues facing the U.S.-Colombia relationship. Their work in advancing democracy and security in Colombia is crucial, and I also encourage you to check out our recent report on U.S.-Colombia drug policy coordination, which also provides valuable insights and recommendations, and I think makes a good companion piece to today's report on Colombia's justice system. Thank you again for being here today. Your participation is vital to the success of our efforts to promote justice, democracy, prosperity, and development in Colombia. I hope you find today's discussion both informative and inspiring, and we look forward to your continued engagement with our work. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to our keynote speaker, Kristen Pisani, who is the Director in the Office of Western Hemisphere Programs at the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. She has been working very closely with our Colombian partners on these issues, and we're absolutely delighted to have her with us today. Thank you very much, Kristen.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Jeff, for that introduction. And thanks to the Atlantic Council for hosting this event on such a salient issue, important not only in Colombia, but throughout the region. I am really excited to be part of this conversation and to see so many experts and representatives from government, NGOs, academia, and the private sector, both in this room and online. This interest reflects the multifaceted nature of justice in Colombia and of the stakeholders required to achieve and maintain our desired outcome. That is a Colombia with a resilient, equitable, and efficient system of justice. As Jeff mentioned, I am currently the Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary and Director of the Office of Western Hemisphere Programs in the State Department's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs. I'd like to share with you today a little bit more on INL's priorities in the region, the work we're doing in Colombia, particularly to strengthen the justice sector, and some of the achievements that we've enjoyed from our long-standing close partnership with Colombia. So starting with INL's mission, Very simple. We aim to keep Americans safe by countering crime, illegal drugs, and instability abroad. And in line with that overarching goal, my office's priorities in the region focus on, first and foremost, the synthetic drug threat, especially to disrupt fentanyl production and trafficking in the hemisphere, which kills 70,000 Americans each year. But we have also not lost sight of the need to reduce coca production and cocaine trafficking, especially in Colombia. We also focus on countering corruption, including by promoting full and effective compliance with the UN Convention Against Corruption and the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption. We're also committed to responding to emerging security threats and challenges with agility, such as security crises in Haiti and in Ecuador, and of course, current events in Venezuela. Another top priority is improving border security and combating human trafficking, migrant smuggling, and the root security drivers of irregular migration. And then we also work to counter malign actions by the PRC, Russia, or other actors that are undermining democracy and the rules-based international order. So my team here in DC works in lockstep with our counterparts in US embassies abroad, as well with our various program implementers. And these relationships are critical for our collective success in advancing institutional reforms and building security programs from the ground up that will strengthen democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. This is especially true in Colombia. Counter-narcotics has been the foundation of INL's efforts there, both historically and currently. Direct and indirect counter-narcotics interventions are guided by a holistic bilateral strategy that the United States developed in 2021 with the prior Colombian administration. But this holistic strategy continues today with the support of the current Petro administration. And it is fundamentally in line with Colombia's national drug policy that was released last year in September. The strategy focuses on three pillars of: one, drug supply reduction; two, rural security, justice, and development; and three, countering environmental crimes, which are so often perpetrated by transnational criminal organizations. With the Petro administration, we are emphasizing interdiction operations, especially cooperation between the security forces and police, as well as anti-money laundering and anti-corruption initiatives, and these are areas where our priorities overlap. We are pursuing several lines of effort to implement this strategy. First, we're supporting the Colombian National Police and other armed forces with specialized training, equipment, ranging from radios to vehicles to small boats, and small construction projects to enable them to interdict drugs and drug traffickers in the most remote areas of Colombia. A second line of effort is supporting the police to become a more professional and innovative organization that better reflects the population they serve. For example, INL has worked with the police on use of force training and standards, and we've continued to support a scholarship program, Vamos Sumando, that has helped over 10,000 Afro-Colombians, indigenous, and otherwise disadvantaged Colombians join the police in the last 10 years. And a third line of effort is supporting the Colombian National Police and its operation of a fleet of 30 Black Hawk helicopters and nearly 150 small unarmed drones. These assets help provide the mobility and reconnaissance necessary to accomplish both counter-narcotics operations and enable the police to be present in the communities where they're so desperately needed. Moreover, INL provides funding for technical assistance, training, and mentorship to the Attorney General's office and the judiciary, including vetted units. And since June of 2023, we've successfully trained 212 officials from the Attorney General's office. That project aims to improve the investigation and conviction rate of homicides of human rights defenders and reveals the perpetrators behind the crimes, including the organized crime nexus. Our investment is also used to target the criminal groups behind the extortion and exploitation of migrants moving through the treacherous Darien Gap that straddles the border between Colombia and Panama. All of our Colombia programming components are important to our overall mission to keep Americans safe. But in order to be sustainable, there also needs to be an emphasis on creating and maintaining strong justice institutions. And after years of close partnership, INL's investment in Colombia's justice sector has proven to be a critical aspect of our foreign assistance. That is, the justice system must have the capacity to efficiently and effectively investigate and prosecute the criminal actors in order for Colombia to have any lasting impact on disrupting and destabilizing criminal activity within its borders. And to address this, our justice sector initiatives aim to tackle corruption and to fight impunity for transnational criminal organizations by expanding and strengthening the capacity of the Colombian police and Attorney General's office to start and, importantly, close criminal cases. So as I think you will see later during the panel with our esteemed panelists, INL's focus on justice sector capacity expansion and anti-corruption directly addresses two of the four findings of the Justice Fair Play report that indicate the demand for justice is increasing and citizens are worried about judicial corruption. And I'll just note, INL also works closely with organizations such as the International Criminal Investigative Training Assistance Program, or ICITAP, the Office of Overseas Prosecutorial Development Assistance and Training, known as OPDAT, and the American Bar Association Rule of Law Initiative in order to provide much training and mentoring for police investigators, prosecutors, magistrates, and judges. And we've seen these efforts pay off. For example, already in 2024, the National Police's Directorate of Criminal Investigation has executed 21 operations, dismantled 9 criminal organizations, and made 16 arrests for crimes related to corruption. And recently, the Colombian National Police captured one of the 3 Tren de Aragua co-founders, Larry Alvarez Nunez, on July 1st, who was wanted for trafficking cocaine and money laundering. And this was followed by the United States sanctioning Tren de Aragua as a transnational criminal organization and offering a $12 million reward for the arrest and capture of some of its other leaders. So to conclude, I hope this underscores the importance that INL places on improving the justice sector in Colombia. We also appreciate the work that others are doing as well, and particularly the Atlantic Council's report, which should both inform stakeholders of the issues facing Colombia and also provide important direction for future work. So I want to thank the Atlantic Council today and everybody who worked on this important report for the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who contributed to this research, especially the Atlantic Council, the Carrizosa family, and Enrique Carrizosa. So in this presentation, first, I will focus on the research methodology. Second, I will explain briefly the key findings. Third, I will discuss some of the recommendations. This research offers an innovative perspective of the Colombian justice system by examining it from the viewpoint of businesses. Unlike existing studies focused on access to justice for citizens and vulnerable people, this perspective highlights issues that affect all stakeholders once they enter the system, even those with economic resources and adequate legal assistance. The research design has a holistic and integrated approach with 2 key elements: a comprehensive understanding of access to justice that encompasses both the initial entry to the system and the ongoing journey within the system, and a broad view of the Colombian justice system, which includes various paths of access: the judicial branch, administrative officials with jurisdictional roles, and individuals like conciliators and administrators and arbitrators. This report is the result of a mixed methods research, combining quantitative and qualitative data. Our study included 2 surveys aimed at collecting companies' perceptions and experiences of accessing justice. We also conducted 17 interviews with stakeholders. We analyzed 84 studies on the Colombian justice system, and to validate and discuss our findings, we held 2 workshops and 2 peer review sessions. The first survey was a pilot within 30 companies. conducted in collaboration with the Colombian American Chamber of Commerce. The second survey included a representative sample of 301 companies, and this is a distribution of companies by economic sector and size within the sample. Now, I will turn to discuss the key findings. The first finding is demands for justice are increasing, resulting in added pressure on the system as a whole and highlighting systemic and managerial issues and inefficiencies. Each year, more cases enter the system than are concluded, leading to a huge backlog. These two figures illustrate that the three most significant obstacles in both judicial and administrative settings are the multiplicity of legal instances, unjustified delays, and the complexity of the process. Interviews highlighted inefficiency as the most prominent characteristic of the justice system, emphasizing its limited capacity for innovation and transformation. They observed that delays are exacerbated by lawyers frequently employing delaying tactics, which judges often fail to sanction or control. This perception is supported by survey data. These findings underscore the critical need for ethical reform in the legal profession to ensure timely and fair justice. The second finding is concerns about access to justice differ across company sizes, but not across sectors of the economy. As illustrated in these two figures, small and large companies experience the justice system differently. Larger companies tend to face fewer challenges likely due to greater resources, while microenterprises, making up 95.3% of businesses in the country, encounter significant obstacles. This challenges the assumption that businesses inherently have access to economic and legal resources that facilitate access to justice. Notably, despite this difference in the experiences in the justice system, delays affect companies of all sizes similarly. The third finding is concerns about judicial corruption and threats to judicial independence and impartiality persist in Colombia. However, experiences of the companies with the justice system vary significantly regarding these obstacles. The survey examines businesses' perceptions of judicial independence and impartiality. Over half of the respondents believe judges could make decisions free from hierarchical or external pressures, through slightly fewer felt judges were free from external influences. Perceptions varied by type of path of justice, with superintendencies, which are administrative agencies, viewed as most susceptible to hierarchical pressures. The survey explores 6 key threats to judicial independence and impartiality, including judicial corruption and undue external influences. Around 44% of respondents using judicial instances and 43% using administrative remedies reported at least one of these 6 threats. These tables highlight the diverse experience of businesses affected by these obstacles, with some feeling the impact more strongly than others. The fourth finding is tutela actions, a right for the protection of constitutional rights, and alternative justice mechanisms such as conciliation and arbitration receive the highest approval ratings in terms of access to justice, while superintendencies receive the least favorable responses. This figure shows the ranking of the paths to justice analyzed in this study. The respondents give higher scores to tutela, conciliation, and arbitration. It's understandable that tutela, with its short procedural timelines, along with alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, are seen as more effective options, given the many legal instances and unjustified delays in the justice system. Judges in the superintendencies are perceived slightly less favorably than the judicial entities, despite being granted jurisdictional powers with the promise of improving access to justice. In this final section, I will explore the 3 sets of recommendations. They involve not only legal reforms, but also transformations in reform design, judicial practices, the legal profession, and law school curricula. First, incorporating innovation and technology in the justice system is essential to address systemic issues and managerial obstacles, enhancing the efficiency and accessibility. Collaboration among diverse actors, including judicial representatives from various levels and users, along with a multidisciplinary approach, can foster innovation. Second, strengthening legitimacy and public trust in the justice system while addressing managerial challenges. Improve judicial governance to address systemic challenges and protect judicial independence and impartiality needs to enhance justice system performance indicators, improve judicial data and information systems, strengthen transparency and accountability, and strengthen ethics and integrity in the justice system. And the third, increasing the use of alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. Survey data show that conciliation and arbitration have achieved positive results across all factors. Given the opportunity to further promote these mechanisms, some possible actions include review legal limitations in the current framework that restrict the effectiveness of these mechanisms, design strategies that achieve effective changes in the country's litigious culture, implement strategies to promote ADR within companies, and incentivize curricular and professional reforms. Finally, I would like to highlight that addressing the issues of access to justice during the process is not only vital for the corporations that depend on a reliable justice system to safeguard their interests, but also critical for the broader Colombian society to ensure that justice is accessible and equitable for all. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanchez, for that excellent overview of the report. And as a reminder to the audience, you can download both the executive summary and the full versions of the report by scanning the QR codes on the screens or also accessing our website. Now I'm pleased to welcome our panel of experts today who are joining us for a discussion where we will delve a little bit deeper into some of the recommendations and findings that Astrid just mentioned. You know, as Jeff and Astrid mentioned, this is a result of a 2-year-long research project, and the new data and information we're presenting will be essential in driving and informing a nuanced and effective judicial reform in Colombia. First, I'd like to welcome Dr. Juan Carlos Botero, who has been a key partner for the center and the research lead behind this project. Dr. Botero is the Dean of Colombia's Pontificia Universidad Javeriana School of Law. He holds a doctorate in law from Georgetown University, a master's degree from Harvard University, and is the former executive director of the World Justice Project. Dr. Botero, welcome. It's been an honor to work with you, and we are pleased to have you here in this panel with us. Next, I'm pleased to welcome our other 3 panelists who are also all members of our U.S.-Colombia Advisory Group and have important experience dealing with companies and private sector actors who have experienced some of the constraints that we've seen and outlined in the report. Muni Jensen is a partner at Denton's Global Advisors. She previously worked at the Colombian Embassy here in D.C. and worked on public affairs, trade, and congressional affairs. And previously, she worked in Cali, in the Cali Chamber of Commerce, the Division of International Trade, and as a Vice President for Market Intelligence at ProExport in Bogotá. Muni, thank you for joining us and for being such an instrumental force behind this project. Stephen Donahue leads McLarty's Associates' work in Northern Latin America. He's also the firm's lead on intelligence, national security, and defense-related issues, and is a former military intelligence officer specializing in Latin America. Stephen, thank you for joining us. And finally, Ambassador Mariana Pacheco, who previously served as Colombia's ambassador to India. Prior to her role, she held the position of Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy of Colombia in D.C. Ambassador Pacheco played a key role in launching the U.S.-Colombia Free Trade Agreement. She's currently a senior consultant at Araujo Ibarra Consultores Internacionales. And Ambassador Pacheco, thank you so much for joining us from Colombia. So thank you, everyone, for participating today. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everybody that we will try to leave some time at the end of the panel for audience to submit some questions. So both virtual and in-person audience can submit your questions to askac.org. And with that, I'd like to start with Dr. Botero. As Astrid noted in her overview, the report outlines a series of constraints in the judicial system in Colombia. Where do you think efforts and resources should be prioritized to drive a meaningful justice reform? And are there any specific areas that require your immediate attention?
Thank you, and thank you again to the Atlantic Council for this partnership. This has been an amazing journey, which I believe only starts because judicial reform is a long-term effort. If you distill the findings of this report into the very basic, judges are overburdened. More cases come than the cases that can be solved. Cases can take 20 years, multiple instances. There is a managerial, business management problem within the system, which is not the fault of one entity. It's the coordination among these entities. This managerial approach to solving the justice issue in Colombia, especially coming from the perspective of the private sector, the users of this. And the private sector is not only the large companies, but the 95% of companies are micro and small companies. Is the economic engine on the country, saying we need to change the way the justice system is managed. It's not as much grand reforms that have been attempted for a long time, is changing the way the machinery of justice within itself operates. This is, I think, where the most opportunity for reform lies.
Okay, thank you. I think that's an excellent point. I think this also provides a really good segue for Stephen, for me to ask this question about a little bit more on, we've heard some of the immediate requests to address the justice reforms in Colombia, right? But why should the United States and the rest of the international stakeholders care or be concerned about the level of access and delivery of justice in Colombia?
Well, one of the things that's really important to the United States is maintaining friends in the region and helping their economies grow. And as the acting assistant secretary said earlier, it's important for the U.S. to have stability in the region for things like migration and drugs and whatever. And the ability of countries like Colombia that are so important to the U.S. to have the stability that comes with transparency, rule of law, that attracts investment, that grows the economy, means that those countries are better able to satisfy the needs of people at home, so they aren't interested or aren't as interested in migrating north. And so as an investor looks at where to put their money, where to invest, because money, funds are fungible and they'll go where they're treated well. They look at things that include rule of law and transparency and level playing field and the ability to get justice and not get caught up in the trap that Juan Carlos talked about, where it takes so long. And so that when you have your board meeting, you're not talking about legal strategy, but you're talking about growing your business and where to invest more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would like to push you a little bit more on that question and also bring in Mooney on that. What are some of the direct economic impacts that we're seeing? If there are any judicial delays that some of the companies in Colombia are experiencing because of some of the constraints that we've outlined in the report, how can we quantify that? And how would you be able to, if you're in a board meeting, communicate the direct economic impacts of these delays?
Well, each board looks at the risk that a new investment has. And one of the risks is the risk of litigation. And so the more time and resources you spend thinking about the risk of litigation and how long it will take and whether you can go to arbitration or are going to have to prepare as you go along with an investment for a potential arbitration, those are all costs. Just like the risk of security issues and having to factor into your business plan security and armored cars and all of that kind of thing, similarly, you have a risk of litigation that you have to factor in. And that's time and complication that board members and the committees that are working on investment are looking at and saying, is this worth it?
Wanting something to add there?
Well, First of all, hello, and thank you so much for this invitation. I'm very encouraged by the Atlantic Council commitment to this project, which I was involved with since the beginning, and I'm very happy to see it come to fruition, because it's now definitely a concrete roadmap for Colombia and a template for other countries that want to go through this process. And I know how much time and effort and the spearheading of Enrique Carrizosa. So it's a good time to release these results and this project, as governance is it's in disarray all over the world. And I want to step back one step on what the impact of faulty justice systems have on democracy, especially today, where the world is populated by populists, extremists, outsiders that sometimes dismiss the importance of institutions, and in particular, the justice sector. So I do believe that this focusing on companies and who are constantly the victims of judicial delays, breakdowns, lack of accountability, transparency, is definitely weakening the strength of democracy. A weak judicial system blocks business operations, slows down growth, creates fear, and discourages new investment, both domestic and FDI. And it weakens transparency and freedom and economic growth. So the fact that there is a breakdown in democracy around the world makes it more important to highlight the breakdowns for by a lot of research from the private sector, but the results, and you have the report on hand, are for society at large.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned lack of accountability and transparency and the impact that has on democracies across the world. So I'd now like to turn to Ambassador Pacheco online. We've talked a lot about the experience of the private sector with some of these constraints, but more on a national and personal level, I'd like to ask you, how can the judicial system rebuild some trust among Colombians? The report shows that approximately 31% of the population is hesitant to approach justice in Colombia due to a lack of trust. So what's your perspective on this, and how do you think it can be addressed?
Thanks. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to the Atlantic Council, and good morning from cold Bogota morning, again, a rainy morning in Bogota. I would like to start by congratulating Universidad Javeriana and the report, and the Atlantic Council for launching this report. Is an excellent, as Muni Jensen just pointed out, a start point and an example not only to Colombia, but also for the rest of the countries in Latin America. I would start by answering this question by repeating the first phrase of the report, which says, "An effective and fair justice system is the cornerstone of any democracy." In Colombia, efforts at judicial reform should focus on providing the necessary resources and support for legal cases until their conclusion. Not doing so risks perpetuating an inefficient and overcrowded system affecting the country's institutional strength and rule of law. This is a fact that the report states very openly and forward. When we speak that more than 93% of people in Colombia believe that the duration of proceedings is a fundamental problem for justice in Colombia, and that 42% say that the main reason that they refrain from approaching the justice system to resolve dispute is that the system takes too long to resolve them, and follow that by a lack of trust in the institution. That means that 30% and don't trust the justice system that calls for a reform, as the report states. If justice is out of reach for the private sector, especially for small and medium companies or large companies, it will be even less accessible to the average Colombian citizen. Therefore, any reform or rebuilding of trust among Colombians calls for a plan. I would add beyond the report that this plan should address the financial sustainability of the system. Second, the judicial competence, and third, the judicial accountability. The judicial system should address also these two main objectives: be responsive to all Colombian citizens and build on trust. I would stress that being responsive means that it should be effective and guarantee the administration of justice and dispute resolution. And with regards to the question, the system should build sufficient judicial trustworthiness and responsiveness to the demands of society. This will include opening itself to scrutiny and citizen participation so it can adhere to society's values rather than its own. So I would stress that trustworthiness and opening a plan, not a medium-term plan, but a long-term plan, as Juan Carlos said at the beginning, calls for an immediate or for a thoughtful reform of the judicial system in Colombia. I would like also to point out, and let me refer, that not everything is bad in the judicial system. We have the tutela system, which it works very effectively, rapidly, not only for foreign investors, but also for domestic and for citizens. But also the Constitutional Court has played a very important role in the balance of power. And I would point out, for example, in the last 2 years, the Constitutional Court has been very effective in this balance of power. Just to refer to two decisions where the Constitutional Court has decided to rule unconstitutional some of the provisions of laws that specifically, for example, I'm referring to the last fiscal reform that brought instability to both foreign and domestic investors when it referred, for example, to royalties in the mining and gas industries and to the free trade zones. The Constitutional Court has played a role of balancing that power and providing that certainty to the economy and, again, to private citizens.
Thank you, Ambassador Pacheco, for that excellent intervention. I think this is also a perfect segue to ask Dr. Botero if perhaps you can expand a little bit on the role of tutela actions and alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, because I believe that that's a very Colombian thing. So if you could expand a little bit on the role that they play and how can they be important mechanisms in improving access to justice, and how can they be expanded if it's a way for us to use them to achieve this.
Yes, of course. The Colombian judicial system, from the point of view of a large company, is a 3-tier system, if you think. One is private arbitration, which is extremely expensive, but very effective. Second is the regular proceedings, which are extremely slow, reliable, generally reliable, but extremely slow. And the third is the fast track, which is a super speedy proceeding, which is called the tutela action, which is a writ for effective enforcement of fundamental rights. It plays the way it plays out is that for a company or a citizen, they can go 20 years in the regular proceeding, 2 months or 1 month in the fast track, which is good. In order to, this is 30% of the 2.6 million cases that go into the system every year, 30% go into this, let's say, fast track, from the point of view of an external observer. The problem comes when this is the same judge that resolves both cases. So the judge can be or extremely slow or extremely fast. And that has no justification other than the architecture of the system. And secondly, sometimes this fast track is used to overturn the decisions of the regular system, which in some cases may be justified, but very extreme cases. And what the ultimate outcome is a system that has multiple instances that is perceived as corrupt by the population for its lack of efficiency, not as much for the corruption of judges, which also happens in every country in the world, but because of the lack of efficiency and the multiple instances that undermine legal security and stability and the rule of law. So addressing this fundamental issue of managerial way of the functioning of the system, the rational proceedings, it has multiple, I mean, the full report is 160 pages. But addressing this is key to unlocking the potential of Colombia.
Thank you very much. And going back to some of the recommendations that we outlined in the report and some of the findings, I think it was particularly interesting that based on the surveys, access to justice varies across company sizes, but not across industries. So I guess this is a question for the panel, and maybe we can go, everybody can answer with a couple of sentences, but how do concerns over the access of justice differ between the different company sizes, and what are some of the unique challenges that, for example, smaller enterprises face versus larger corporations? So maybe we can start with Stephen.
I don't know. I think that the whole concept for an international investor, for somebody who's going to bring FDI into Colombia or any other country, but when you look at Colombia, there's a very complicated and convoluted judicial system that also takes a long time. Juan Carlos and I were talking yesterday about how many supreme judicial entities there are in Colombia. You've got the Supreme Court, you've got the Constitutional Court, you've got the Consejo de Estado, you've got the Electoral Supreme Court, you've got the Fiscalía that's supreme, Consejo Superior de la Judicatura, and there's
the Discipline Court.
So
7.
When you look at that and you're explaining to an investment committee that this is, when you're looking at legal risk, it's complicated, and that makes folks really, it creates a situation where unless the investment is really ripe, it makes you scratch your head and say, are we willing to take the risk, especially given the timelines, to invest in something where our return on investment is reliant on a judicial system that is that convoluted and can be slow. And even though, as Juan says, and I have tremendous respect for his legal reasoning, but even though it eventually comes out in the right place, there's a time value of that investment that is waiting to move forward, that you start thinking, well, maybe I'll invest in another country.
Yeah, affecting Colombia's competitiveness against
Sure.
its peers, for sure. Moni?
I think the access to justice is what differentiates the small companies to the large, but they all face the breakdowns in accuracy and efficiency. And I think that's kind of the core of the findings of this report. And it makes a huge difference for competitiveness in a country, for development, both economic and social, especially in developing countries. And it creates growth and prosperity when it works. It creates investment, both domestic and FDI. But anything that points at policy instability, insufficient legal security, lack of transparency in regulatory decisions, the trust issue, is going to cause, and we see it in our daily lives as consultants, companies shutting down, stopping their growth plans, canceling expansion plans, going to other countries that have easier legal and justice systems, withdraw from the market altogether, and then just there's breakdown in the private sector and in the ability to growth. And we've seen that erosion in recent years, and the investment numbers usually follow. And it's really important right now for this is a pitch, that the private sector, which is highly affected by this, both in the US and around the world and in Colombia, really try to support initiatives like this one, because the impact is immediate, and you can really see it in numbers. And it's not just withdrawing from a market, it's supporting the efficiency and the accuracy of the judicial system that is going to be the solution.
Perfect, thank you. And then we talked a lot about, bigger companies and FDIs, towards Colombia. Would like for the remaining two panelists to focus a little bit more also on the smaller enterprises and the impact, for example, on SMEs.
Okay, the finding is as interesting about what the difference are between small and large companies, but I think the most interesting part of the finding is on what it is the same between small and large companies. So entering the system is easier for large companies than smaller companies, and the concerns about independence of the judiciary and corruption are larger for small companies. However, once you enter the system, it's as if you entered a tunnel that has no exit. And the tunnel is the same for a tiny 2-employee company than for a 2,000 employees companies. And this tunnel is long and convoluted. And that piece, unless you take the fast track, which is a month, but it makes no sense because it's the same judge deciding both cases. So something in the way the system, the cases go through the tunnel, has to be changed so that what is the same for both large and small companies is shortened.
Perfect. Ambassador Pacheco, any final comments? And then because of time, I'll take one question from the audience. Thank you very much, everybody, for submitting your questions, and then we can move on to the closing remarks.
Thank you. I truly believe, and I agree with the previous panelists, that the justice system is just overwhelmed. The judges we're short in judges. The management has a problem. There's problem in corruption. There is problem in corruption in coordination, and they're backlogged. Although small and medium enterprises have access to tutela, they have access, and as it has been explained, of course, the higher courts have taken decisions that improve their access to justice, and especially they protect the balance of power and therefore the check and balances of the decisions that sometimes hurt their businesses. I would like to add something that Plan Colombia, more than 20 years ago, I know Stephen here was with me in that time. It was very key in improving and providing trust to the Colombian justice system. As the report points out, the creation of the Casas de Justicia was an amazing and still an amazing program that provides justice to many underprivileged areas of Colombia, and they still do so. So I believe that U.S. support, U.S. investment through aid, through USAID or INL or other means in our justice system, and especially, again, to address those main problems that we have, and providing, again, trust and effectiveness in our system would be key, and not only for our bilateral relations, but for the future and the growth of Colombia.
Thank you, Ambassador Pacheco. So I think I'm going to take this question from Jake, and I think it's a perfect follow-up question to what you just said, Ambassador Pacheco, and also to what you pointed at, Muni, on the role of the private sector to continue supporting initiatives like this one. The question is, what role are international NGOs working in justice, rule of law, and governance currently playing in Colombia, and what more could be done to better increase access to justice in the country? So going above and beyond, the private sector, how other NGOs could continue to support efforts similar to this one. Maybe we can start with you.
I heard something before we started this panel it's obvious, but it's very important to underline, is how the courts are the buffer against democratic breakdown, not just in Colombia, everywhere. And I think one of the main tools that we have at our disposal is to put things out in public with transparency, where everybody can look and see what the breakdowns are, for whom. And I think that's the beginning of the solution. And I think this is exactly the nature and the spirit of this report.
Okay. Thank you very much, Muni. Ambassador Pacheco, any final comments on that question?
Yes, I would go back to the first question that the report points out. An effective and fair justice system is a cornerstone of any democracy. So access to all citizens to the justice system is one of the cornerstones, not only to democracy and also to maintaining our democracy, especially in these convoluted times that we're living in. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but thank you to all of our panelists for joining this insightful conversation. And once again, we encourage the audience to download the full report at our website. We also have an executive version, so if you have any questions or require additional information on the data that we've presented here, please feel free to reach out. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Enrique Carrizosa, chairman of IC Holdings, who has also been an instrumental force behind this project. Enrique, thank you so much for all of your support, and great that you could join us today.
Thank you, and thank you to all the panelists and speakers that we've had today. On behalf of my family and our group of companies, I'm pleased today to share the results of a 2-year-long project, which we've been working together in alliance with the Universidad Javeriana in Bogotá, Colombia, and with the Atlantic Council here in Washington, D.C. The project is named Justice Fair Play in Colombia, and it's a new tool that measures and identifies improvements that can be made in the country's judicial system that would better its effectiveness, efficiency, accessibility, independence, and impartiality for the common good of its citizens and companies. The development of this tool was a huge undertaking. We worked closely with the Colombian American Chamber of Commerce, AmCham, in Bogotá, and with its affiliated companies to determine the private sector's perception and quality of efficiency of the judicial system. We also conducted a nationwide survey that included companies of all sizes from all sectors. We interviewed a multitude of key players within the judicial branch whose valuable opinions allowed us to form a package of valuable recommendations for this project. We also drew from recommendations of academic peers from Argentina, Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Mexico, who contributed important methodological and investigative perspective to this final product. The process yielded a breadth of information and insights, and I would like to share and recap a few of the facts and recommendations that I find particularly important. I'll pick one of the key problems that was identified, the excessive time to receive a definitive ruling. To shed some light, between 1996 and 2022, that's 26 years, the Colombian population grew by 39%, but the number of cases filed grew 172%. From a budgetary standpoint, the judicial branch received 17% less of the country's budget over the same time. To be fair with those difficult budgetary decisions, the budget measured as a percent of GDP has stayed within international standards. But the reality is that the judicial system is over capacity and has an ever-growing backlog. To effectively tackle this and other challenges, the study recommends a holistic approach aimed at improving the efficiency, efficacy, accessibility, impartiality, and independence of the Colombian justice system. The key to this strategy is improving metrics and management with the integration of innovation and technology. This is a significant opportunity to streamline processes and improve case management through the use of modern technology such as electronic case management systems, robotic process automation, and AI. These technologies can offer predictive analysis, optimize resource allocation, and ensure the consistent application of legal precedents and enhancing the coherence and reliability of judicial outcomes. Moreover, the study advocates for multidisciplinary collaboration to foster innovation within the judiciary. It involves integrating knowledge about law with psychology, design, and management. It's about creating platforms for dialogue and collaboration, which can then catalyze the development of innovative solutions for the judicial challenges. Colombia lacks an effective screening mechanism to differentiate between meritorious and frivolous cases. Addressing the backlog and case management inefficiencies through a better triage system and considering the implementation of administrative fees for specific cases can improve system efficiency without sacrificing access to justice, especially for vulnerable populations. On the topic of judicial independence, that depends on levels of transparency and accountability. The High Court should embrace principles of good corporate governance and open government. And the judicial branch should meet optimal standards of open justice. We recognize that each of these recommendations are a huge undertaking and will require a lot of collaboration and support from within the judiciary, the Colombian government, academia, and especially from knowledgeable and credible third parties. That is why it's so important to have this launch events here in the United States. I would like to make a case on why investing in a more effective and equal justice system in Colombia is crucial for the United States. The first is the fact that Colombia's stability affects the stability of the entire region. A better functioning justice system helps combat organized crime, drug trafficking, and insurgency, which are not only domestic issues, but are regional concerns. Finally, a reliable justice system is critical for creating an environment conducive to investment, economic growth, and prosperity. It enhances legal certainty, protects property rights, and facilitates commercial dispute resolution. By promoting economic development in Colombia, the United States can strengthen bilateral commercial ties and support through the growth of what historically has been a key ally in the region, all of which can only be possible if gaps in the administration of justice in Colombia are addressed. The executive report of the project is now available to download at the Atlantic Council website. I want to invite INL, USAID, and other U.S. government agencies to review the report and to engage with the research team. Our interest is to expand this methodology on a regional level, to create an interactive tool to measure rule of law implementation across Latin America and compare it to international standards. This collaboration has proven successful in the past. We also want to invite corporate foundations, multilateral agencies, and private investment funds to review this report and provide us with feedback for future engagement and improvement. The engagement of public, private, and academic institutions will be essential in keeping this tool relevant year over year, as well as in enabling the implementation of this tool across the region. So thank you for joining us today. And on behalf of myself, the Universidad Javeriana, and the Atlantic Council, I really look forward to our conversations with you in the future. Thank you, and have a great day.
Y abra más puertas. Quiero que entendamos que cuando todos sumamos se hace la diferencia. Diversos como hay palabras en el diccionario, todos los significados usan el mismo abecedario. Yo soy como tú.